ladies and gentlemen, my name is Andrew Stott and I'm the Emperor of Stomaria. Today I want to discuss the founding of Stamaria. So this is a video that I've been meaning to make for a long time now, and I actually mentioned it in a recent live stream a little over a month ago, because I think it is important that as many citizens and supporters of Stamaria understand my mindset, understand the journey that I've been on that led to the formation of Stamaria. Now, I've actually made videos like this before. For example, in 2021, I made a video called Why Was Stamaria Founded? And that was, and again, another insight into my own mindset, into the history of Stamaria and why it was founded in the first place. But I wanted to delve into this a little bit more, because you could arguably say that Stamaria, the inspiration for Stamaria, the first seed being planted, if you like, was back in the early 2000s. But it really wasn't until about 15 years ago where the real learning curve, the real development of the idea of building something new, building a new civilization, a new society, really began to take shape when I started involving myself in British politics. However, before we get into all that, I did want to touch on the early 2000s and specifically an RTS game called Empire Earth, because this is ultimately what inspired the formation, the foundation, the creation of what would become Stamaria. So me and my siblings would play this game, and it was a civilization building game. So you would collect resources and build villages and towns and cities. You could have trade agreements, you could build alliances with other people, and of course you would build up armies and try to conquer one another. And we tried to take these ideas and apply them in the real world. So me and my siblings would go out into the back garden, or we would go into the woods and we would get branches and lean them against a tree and try to establish these dwellings. We would try to collect resources, and it was very, very primitive what we were doing initially, but in the end, it was something far more sophisticated. We built these structures, these fortifications, we had chariots, we invited our friends over, and we had these battles with the weapons that we made, these spears and shields and swords and all the rest of it. And we had an agrarian economy and a taxation system, and we tried to set up various industries on obviously a very small, low-key level that only children and adolescents can do. But this wasn't what most people today would define as a micronation. We had never come across the term micronation before. This was simply us going out there and having fun with this game that we were playing, and collectively, over the years, it was simply referred to as the Empire. And it was through the Empire that I developed a very keen interest in ancient history. And the more obscure the civilization, the better. So when most people talk about ancient history, it normally revolves around Rome, Greece, or Egypt, which is obviously fine. These are civilizations that are very interesting to me as well. But as I say, I was more interested in the Carthaginians, the Lydians, the Persians, the Phoenicians, the Akkadians, the Assyrians, and of course the Sumerians. These are civilizations which I had a very keen fascination with. I wanted to know how they came about. How did that civilization become established? How did it maintain itself? How did it work? How did they operate? How did it function? And ultimately, what happened to them? And once I actually started to piece all of this together, and I learned more and more about all of these different civilizations, all these different societies, all of these different empires of the ancient past, I started to look around the modern world, and I started to wonder if there was anything that we had learned from that, or were we repeating the same mistakes that have been made 1,000 times before all across the world. Now, as time went on, my life took on different forms and I needed to focus on other things. There were other priorities aside from worrying about ancient civilizations and the comparisons with modern civilizations. But I never lost this drive to understand and this desire to build. And I think this is the reason that I initially decided to get involved in politics. So when I was about 15, 16 years old, I decided to join the Green Party, because then as now, I believed that environmental conservation and renewable energy was very important. And it is in fact a cornerstone of Stamaria's values and objectives to this day. Now, I wasn't especially politically active in the sense that I never attended rallies or stood for election or anything like that. But I did hand out flyers, and I even started a petition at my school to get recycling bins installed on the premises, which in fairness was a success. But once I left school, I started to think about this a little bit more seriously, and I decided to survey the political landscape and see what was out there. And as far as I was concerned, there was nothing that actually mirrored my own views. And the thing that you have to understand about me is that I'm not especially ideologically driven, in the sense that I don't fit neatly either into the left or the right camp. I pull policies, values, and aspirations from all sides of the political spectrum if I think it's going to advance what I actually want to do. And what I want to do is create a cohesive and sustainable society that maximizes prosperity and freedom for the most people. And I don't care if these values and aspirations, policies, or whatever else are considered left-wing or right-wing. I am far more pragmatic than that. I simply want these policies, these values, these aspirations, these objectives to be able to blend together to the point that they make sense. And the only thing that's been absolutely consistent throughout my involvement in the political process right up until this day is my absolute disdain and hatred for political extremism, that being communism, fascism, neo-Nazism, and whatever else. That said, over time, I have become a lot more socially conservative and libertarian, in that I believe that maximizing prosperity and maximizing freedom can only come from a small but strong government. And even though that this is very much a libertarian value, as I say, because I don't fit neatly into the left-right spectrum as such, I do have values and aspirations that many would be considered left-leaning, such as my keen advocacy for environmental protection and renewable energy. This is something that's not very heavily touted on the right side of the aisle. And so, having surveyed the political landscape, I couldn't find a political home for me. And so, in that situation, I did what I always do. I hopped into the driving seat and I did it myself. And so in October 2009, I founded the United People's Party at the ripe old age of 19. And a few weeks later, I actually joined my local council, the Embourne Parish Council. And in March 2010, I actually got another member of the United People's Party onto that same council. And because the council was so small, I believe there was only 6 members at the time, I made a point of saying that we actually controlled 1/3 of that council. And even though parish councils are not party political, typically, it was nevertheless very exciting for a young, enthusiastic teenage Andrew to be able to say that he controlled 1/3 of a parish council. But as I say, this was just the beginning of my political journey, and I wanted to make sure that we got off to a great start. And to be able to have that as the starting position, in my opinion, was quite good. Now, at this point, I'm sure most of you have noticed that the emblem of the United People's Party is virtually identical to that of Stamaria, and that is not a coincidence. I founded the United People's Party by myself, and I founded Stamaria by myself, and the emblem has the same meaning. It's an emblem that's been used across the world throughout history for many reasons, but for me, it's about new beginnings. And the fact that it's depicted in ancient Sumer, the cradle of human civilization, only re-emphasizes that meaning. And as I said earlier in this video, my interest in ancient history and ancient civilizations and the ancient past, that has fed through my life in more ways than one. And this is represented, again, in my involvement in the political process from the very start. It's something that I wanted to do, to create something new, a new society, a new civilization, a new way of doing things. Now, soon after securing these 2 seats on the Embourne Parish Council on behalf of the United People's Party, my family decided to move. And so, unfortunately, those seats had to be resigned, and eventually I decided to stand in the 2011 parish council elections in the new village that I was residing in, which was Bucklebury, and I managed to secure another seat there. And at the same time, another party member in another part of the world managed to secure another parish council seat on the Milton Parish Council. So in all, in 2009, we ended the year with a grand total of 6 members. In 2010, we managed to increase that to 18 members. And in 2011, we managed to increase that still further to 37 members. And during that time period, we had managed to win 4 parish council seats, 2 of which were secured by me personally. So there's obviously nothing spectacular or groundbreaking in what has been accomplished so far through the United People's Party, but nevertheless, it is something that I like to celebrate because, as I say, I founded that party when I was 19, and I had accomplished something, even if it was incredibly minute and the impact was incredibly negligible in the grand scheme of things. I was doing what I set out to do. I wanted to make my mark, I wanted to change my world, and I wanted to improve the lives of the people around me, and this was the path forward, in my opinion. This was the way to do it. And even though that I was the driving force behind the United People's Party, I wasn't really put out there as a cult-like figure in the same way that the party leaders of more mainstream parties are. So you look at any of the leaders of the major parties and they'll have their faces and their names plastered on every leaflet across the website and all the publications they put out there. It'll all be revolving around the party leader. And in the United People's Party, it wasn't really like that. I did have a profile picture featuring the emblem of the party in the background and all that jazz, but I never really had any publications or literature that featured me, and that was quite deliberate. And it was deliberate for two reasons. The first is that I was far more interested in discussing the ideas, the policies. I wanted to refine them. I wanted to cut my teeth on them. I wanted to make sure that we had it right before we started to expand too large and too rapidly, and then it would become more complicated or more controversial to actually go out and change them. And the other reason is that at age 21 at the time, in 2011, I had never, at that point, really done anything in the way of public speaking when it came to politics. And this was obviously something that made me slightly nervous. I mean, I was slightly shy and reclusive perhaps when I was growing up. I wasn't that interested in public dialogue with people in that way. But because I involved myself in the political process, I kind of forced myself out of my own comfort zone. And that, for the record, is a good way to go about it when you face any of these sorts of problems in your life. Force yourself out of that comfort zone if you have to. But certainly breaking the mold is a good way to go about doing that. And as I say, in 2011, I got that chance. So I was actually invited to speak at a rally in London. Now, my particular subject was the European Union, in the sense that the United People's Party and myself at the time was anti-EU. We wanted a referendum on the European Union, membership of the European Union, so that we could vote to withdraw from it, for various reasons, which is beyond the scope of this video, really. However, once I actually got to this rally, which did cover various other topics, it was immigration and foreign aid from memory, I think, was on the agenda. But the rally itself, when it was being hosted, was absolutely god-awful in the sense that the weather was just torrential. It was hammering it down constantly, and a lot of the attendees started to drift off, and we were losing the crowd, basically. And as these speakers before me were, given their spiel, some of them were so dull and enthusiastic, it didn't inspire people to continue standing in the rain listening to it. And so, as I say, everyone was drifting off and going into the local pub. So when it came to my turn to speak, I didn't hang about for people to introduce me. I didn't hang about for people to set anything up for me, or the speakers and the microphones or whatever else. I wanted just to get up there, summarize what I wanted to say, and encourage people to actually go out there and change the world as they saw fit, to do it themselves. This has been the message that I have been promoting for a very long time now, back as far as 2011 and even before that. But this is the first recorded instance of me actually giving some kind of speech to people in the public setting. And I didn't think I did too badly. And it was actually this event that made me think that I could actually do this. I could do public speaking. With a bit of work, with a bit of refining, I could go out there and I could talk to people about political issues. And as long as I had some grasp of it, as long as I carried it with some confidence, then I would be able to do that. So I jumped onto this statue and I gave my spiel. They videoed it, and that was the first clip ever of me giving a political speech. And I think it's at this point where I kind of came out my shell and I really gave it my all from there on.
The question is how we achieve these things. And it is events like today that can spark something, spark a movement in this country that will change it for the better. And it is up to you to campaign, to get involved in the political process, to change things yourself, because the government will not do it for you. If there is one thing that you leave here with today, remember this: nothing less than the future of Britain is at stake, and the future belongs to those who are willing to fight for it. Thank you.
Yes, I know my hair looks awful. Let's just leave it there. Now, in 2012, we actually stood 3 candidates in the council elections, which received an average of about 5.9%. So it wasn't the best result that could have come from it, but it was a start. It was something that we could build on. And we also stood in our first ever parliamentary by-election. So this is where we put up a candidate to become a member of parliament. For those who are outside of the United Kingdom, that just means it's a candidate to become a member of the national government. So the odds of us succeeding in that were obviously incredibly slim, far more so because we live in a first-past-the-post system. So minor parties tend to get hammered pretty badly in by-elections and elections in general, to be honest. But the reason that we did it is the same reason that a lot of minor parties do it. By-elections attract a lot of nationwide publicity, relatively speaking. And so it only takes a few people from around the country to see this party, its name, its emblem, some of its values and aspirations, to become interested in it, to join up, to become activists, to become candidates themselves and whatever else. You have to put yourself out there and prepare to be absolutely hammered and absolutely humiliated in an effort to drive things forward. And that is the strategy that we and many other minor parties have used in the past. Now, when it came to the actual result of this by-election, we managed to get about 0.1% of the vote and came 14th out of 14 candidates. And I'm pretty sure that 0.1% was rounded up. So to say it was a disaster would be a bit of an understatement. However, it did accomplish what we set out to do. We did manage to attract new members for the party from across the country, who in turn became activists and candidates later on. So that, again, is the goal of the by-election from our own perspective in terms of actually competing against some of these bigger players. Now, I just want to mention here that I'm not actually going to be discussing every election and every by-election that we ever participated in. There's just not enough time, and frankly, I can't remember them all. But if you want to do your own due diligence and do research, then please do. Now, come 2013, this is where the first major red flag kind of comes up, because the party's membership has expanded. There are a lot of members, comparatively speaking. It's gone from 6 members in 2009 to over 50, I think around maybe 60 members in 2013. And the membership has decided to take the party in a slightly different direction, in the sense that the way that the structure of the United People's Party works is that any changes to the party's name, emblem, or the constitution, the structure, the way we do things, can only take place through what we called a party referendum. Now, the question on the referendum itself was whether or not we should change the name and the emblem of the party in order to appeal to a greater audience, to kind of pin down what it is we stand for, and to effectively turn the United People's Party into something that's slightly more ideologically distinct. Now, I was slightly more reluctant than most to go down this path because, as I made clear earlier in this video, I'm not an especially ideologically driven individual. I don't like being pigeonholed if I can avoid it. However, over 90% of the party membership voted in favour of this change. And so, naturally, that is what happened. And so the United People's Party became the Patriotic Socialist Party. Now, the Patriotic Socialist Party was a party that was a blend of left and right, just like the United People's Party. The values, the aspirations, the objectives, none of this changed. But the image, the brand did, in order to more readily capture people's interest and hopefully gain some more interest and support, because we were far more ideologically distinct. People didn't have to question too much what we stood for. They kind of understood where we were coming from. And this did have an impact, a positive impact in terms of membership recruitment, in terms of electoral gains and all that jazz. But in terms of the actual direction of the party, this was where I started to feel a little bit uneasy, because, as is going to be the case, I was the leader of the party, but I didn't control it with an iron fist. That is to say, I started the United People's Party, and I had total control over it. I knew exactly where it was going. It was a vehicle to accomplish something that I believed to be the right way forward. However, because the party membership decided to take it in a different direction, I was now the leader of a party, the brand of which I was not entirely comfortable with. And as we'll see later on, this became a recurring theme, which was a bit draining from my own perspective. Now, the chosen emblem of the Patriotic Socialist Party was quite an interesting one, because we were trying to do three things with it. First, we were trying to incorporate the original emblem, that is, say, the star of the United People's Party. We also wanted to incorporate some variant of the Union flag. And then, of course, we wanted to highlight our more socialistic credentials by utilising the colour red. And so that is ultimately the emblem that we ended up with. So with the referendum over and the name and the emblem change in full swing, the Patriotic Socialist Party was formally launched on the 1st of January 2014. And 2014 was a mixed bag. We stood in 2 parliamentary by-elections, and we got hammered in the same way that we did in the original by-election in 2012. And we stood 3 candidates in the council elections, which secured something in the region of 3.5% of the vote, or something to that effect. It wasn't a huge vote share. However, in terms of the number of members and the number of activists, that did increase. So we managed to recruit an additional 10 or 20 members, in addition to the ones that we managed to retain after the change. And so it took us to about 71 members. However, it was 2015 where it truly reached its pinnacle. It reached its peak, and it was a bit downhill from that point. So in 2015, we had the 2015 general election, the council elections, and parish council elections. So there was a lot going on. And we had quite a sizable membership and activist base to work with at that time compared to previous years. And so we actually managed to stand 2 parliamentary candidates, including myself, although I was only a paper candidate to be fair. And we also managed to stand 10 candidates for the council elections and 4 candidates for the parish council elections. And when all was said and done, we managed to walk away, being hammered obviously in the parliamentary elections, as you would expect. But we walked away with around 1,000 votes across the board, which was, a respectable amount, I suppose, from our own perspective at least. And 3 local councillors, 3 parish councillors were elected to their respective positions. So that was the high watermark of the party. That was top tier success as far as we were concerned. And it was actually, not only for that reason, but it was also one of the most enjoyable experiences of my political career, if you like, because I managed to take 2 or 3 weeks off, and I managed to travel the country. I stayed in these local, hotels and all the rest of it, all at my own expense, I should stress, to campaign for each of these candidates, and I met a lot of great people and had a lot of interesting conversations. And to be able to go about travelling, meeting all of these candidates and working with them and trying to get them onto their local councils and trying to secure them as many votes as possible, that was a real interesting experience for me. And I did enjoy it a lot. However, that, as I say, was the pinnacle of my involvement in the party political process. Because in 2015, after the election took place, after everything died down, towards the final months of 2015, the party membership once again decided that they wanted to change the name and the emblem of the party. And as I say, this is something that I went along with, 90% approval, and it became the British People's Party. And by this point, I was a little bit drained, to be honest. I was a bit fed up with having to chop and change the party itself. You know, I went along with it. I stood by the decision. I did what I could to facilitate it. But I was not overly happy with the results. And had I gone against the results, we would have lost far more members than we would have retained. So I was in a bit of a bind in that sense. But when all's said and done, when the British People's Party was founded and launched, come 2016, I had enough. I was done. I had been leading this party since I was a teenager in 2009, and it had been going some 7 years. So having had enough and wanting to enjoy more of my own life rather than dedicate everything to politics for very minimal results, I decided to step down as the leader of the now British People's Party. And I offered up the leadership position to the membership. You can have an election, choose the next leader, and do as you wish. Not a single member of the party came forward to take on my position. And many of them cited that if I wasn't going to be at the helm of the party, then they weren't interested in being involved. Because as I said earlier, and is often the case, I was the driving force behind a lot of what that party did, be it the United People's Party, the Patriotic Socialist Party, the British People's Party, whatever name it fell under. It was the same people, same policy, same ideology, same kind of driving mission, if you like, but with a different coat of paint. But this constant change and this wariness that I was now feeling towards the whole process, kind of forced my hand, and I wanted to walk away. But because there was no one to take over, the only thing that could be done was to formally dissolve the party. And so after 7 years of campaigning, of getting people onto their local councils, in terms of getting people involved in politics and the political process and encouraging people to go out and vote and all of that jazz, all small successes in their own right. But at the end of the day, there was nothing to show for it. And that was obviously disappointing from my own perspective, but equally, I don't know if it would have been more disappointing had someone else taken the helm and taken the party in an entirely different direction and be unrecognisable from what I initially set it up as. So to this day, I question which was the better path forward, if someone was able to take on the responsibilities of being a party leader and taking it in whatever direction they thought best, or if it was better that it was simply dissolved. But fate had decided that well in advance. It's not something I needed to worry about. And leading on from that a little bit, one of the most humbling experiences of making this video has been the inability for me to pull across as much content as I thought I was going to be able to regarding the Patriotic Socialist Party, the United People's Party, and the British People's Party. That is to say, when the party dissolved, nearly a decade ago at this point, we closed down the website. The devices which the artwork, the images, the history, the constitution of these parties was saved on have been long since recycled or disposed of in some way, with no backups being saved. The literature, the leaflets of these parties, they've been thrown out. The merchandise, it's not here anymore, because why would we hold on to it? It's simply merchandise, literature, files from parties that no longer exist. But I do lament in some way that I didn't hold on to something, because over the last day or so, in putting this video together very gradually, I have found it to be like trying to uncover a lost civilization, a lost history, which is largely lost to the ages. And were it not for me knowing about it, I would have never obviously discovered it. And a lot of these images that you have seen is purely because of these, defunct Twitter accounts and things like that, which completely unauthorized or not controlled by the central party at the time, have just gone inactive but not deleted. So there is a few snippets of information still floating about out there, and have done so for the last 10 years or more. But it is a bit surreal for me, because it's like those 7 years of my life didn't count for anything. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at is that one of the reasons that Stamaria was established was precisely because this is something that I can hold on to. This is something that I can pass on. This is something that will be quite literally written in stone, but it is physical, it is real, and it is permanent in some way, because this is something that I am developing and expanding on behalf of my family and of my community. And it's not something that I need to rely to convince millions of people to think the way I do, to behave the way I do, in order to accomplish the shared values and aspirations of millions of people out there. I don't need to do that. I can simply live my own life this way. And if people want to get behind us, if people want to support us, if people think that what we stand for is the right way forward, then they can get involved. But if they choose not to, we can still keep going. I have total control and authority over my own life. I have total control and authority over Stamaria. I don't need to worry about changing things that I don't want to change. I don't need to worry about convincing people to live a certain way, to behave a certain way, to vote a certain way. I can do it myself. However, having said that, there is this common misconception, I think, that I went from being involved in politics straight to Stamaria. And that's not even remotely the case. When I dissolved the British People's Party, that was back in 2016, and Stamaria wasn't founded until 2019. So the transition was a lot more complicated than that, because I didn't actually have any intention of getting back in the public arena, if you like, in any real way. After I dissolved the party, I started to focus more on my own life. And by a set of coincidences, I actually managed to meet Samantha. The day after I met Samantha in January 2017, we went on our first date, and in November 2017, that same year, I actually proposed to her and we got engaged. And it wasn't until sometime in mid-2018 when me and Samantha were walking into town for some dinner that we just started discussing our childhoods. And I started reminiscing about Empire Earth and what me and my siblings would do with the Empire, and all of these experiences I had. And she was very envious in some way, and she said something along the lines of, wouldn't it be great if we could just do something like that now? And that one comment, that one off-the-cuff remark, kind of sparked something inside me again. Because I got involved in politics initially in 2009 because I wanted to build. I wanted to actually create something. I wanted to establish that new society, that new civilization, that new way forward, that new way of doing things. And in my book, the only way to do that was going to be through politics, to implement change on a local or a national scale. However, with that sole comment being made, it kind of spurred me into action, and it sort of lit a fuse. And the immediate reaction from me was, well, why can't I? Why can't we just do something like that? Why can't we build the world that we want to build? Why can't we take our own corner of the world and establish something ourselves? And that's really where it all started. And I suppose you have Samantha to thank ultimately for the formation of Stamaria, because perhaps without that conversation, perhaps without that inadvertent nudging, Stamaria may never have been formed. I may have just gone on living my life as a completely private citizen of the United Kingdom and gone about my merry ways. But now I find myself at the helm of a growing and ever more firmly established community, which is gradually turning itself from myself and a flag in a corner of my living room into something far more meaningful and far more impactful and I think Stamaria, has already had far more impact on my own life personally in a positive way than politics ever did. And I am very confident that I'm going to be able to help far more people as the Emperor of Stamaria rather than the leader of a political party. And so in the end, that's how Stamaria was founded. And the rest, as they say, is history. If you want to learn more about Stamaria or play an active role in our development and expansion, visit our website at www.stamaria.com and find out what it means to be a Stamarian.